This week on The Inside Story, a new president in Taiwan inherits a strained relationship with China, dueling visions for the future of Asia as the U.S. and China meet in Singapore, and a special report highlighting the unique culture of Taiwan's front line, the Kinmen Islands, where residents see a pathway toward easing tensions with Beijing. Now, on The Inside Story, the future of Taiwan.
Hello and welcome to The Inside Story. I'm Elizabeth Lee. At its closest, the self-governed island of Taiwan is about 130 kilometers away from China. While democratic Taiwan and communist China are connected through business, trade, and family ties, they are still worlds apart. Relations have been tense, especially now as a new president takes office in Taipei. The island's residents have mixed views on how well the new administration will handle Taipei's relationship with Beijing, which could have global ripple effects. VOA's William Yang reports in these two stories from Taipei.
The future of Taiwan, at least for the next 4 years, largely depends on the actions of the island's new president, Kinmen. Residents here have a few expectations.
I think the Lai administration will continue the same foreign policy agenda that focuses on maintaining close ties with the United States and Japan.
I believe leaders and people in Taiwan and China all want both sides of the Taiwan Strait to maintain the status quo for the next 4 years.
On the day he was elected as Taiwan's next president, Lai laid out his Beijing policy.
As long as there is dignity and parity to two sides of the strait, Taiwan is very willing to engage in dialogue with China and willing to exchange, to cooperate for the benefit of the people on both sides of the strait, to create a free and prosperous environment.
But Beijing has labeled Lai with strong words, says geopolitical analyst Amanda Shao.
They called Lai a secessionist, a golden grandchild of Taiwanese independence.
Beijing claims Taiwan, a self-governed democracy, as part of China. Relations between Beijing and Taipei soured since Taiwan's then president Tsai Ing-wen came to power 8 years ago. Beijing has been increasing military pressure during her presidency. Lai is from the same party as Tsai and is expected to face more pressure from China during his term in office. During Lai's presidency, he'll also have to manage China's exploitation of political divisions within Taiwan.
So Beijing does see greater political divisions in Taiwan as useful to its ultimate goal of unification. So it is a form of political interference.
Shao says the U.S. may play a role in Beijing's relationship with Taiwan's new president.
Beijing's approach, it seems, at least for now, is really to lean on Washington to keep the incoming Lai administration on a more moderate course.
Taiwan will also continue to look to the U.S. to help bolster itself against China by strengthening relations with Washington. A bipartisan delegation of former U.S. officials attended Lai's inauguration. Since 2022, President Tsai has met with 2 separate U.S. House speakers, says political scientist Lev Nachman.
She most certainly is going to be remembered as the president under which the U.S.-Taiwan relationship reached this new level of a rock-solid status.
But whether the rock-solid status continues may depend on who is elected the next president of the United States, says Nachman.
What Joe Biden represents is a level of predictability and certainty. If Donald Trump is elected, that brings in uncertainty.
President Lai is also expected to deepen engagements with European nations as he begins to navigate the increasingly divided global landscape as the new president of Taiwan. The beginning of Taiwan President Lai Ching-te's tenure has brought new uncertainties for the democratically governed island. including its relations with Communist China. Will it escalate war?
I'm very concerned about the situation across the Taiwan Strait.
Theoretically, a war probably won't break out across the Taiwan Strait, but the risk of miscalculation seems inevitable. As a result, we should remain cautious when handling relations with China.
Beijing sees self-governed Taiwan as part of China and wants reunification. In recent years, China has been increasing military pressure on Taiwan. To defend itself, former President Tsai Ing-wen's administration put in place a series of defense measures, including extending required military service. Beginning this year, some young men will have to serve 1 year instead of the previous length of 4 months.
I think there will certainly be some complaints, because extending the military service from 4 months to 1 year may disrupt some people's life plans.
During his inauguration speech, Lai vowed to continue strengthening Taiwan's defenses.
Taiwan makes no concessions on democracy and freedom. Peace is the only option, and prosperity is our goal for long-term peace and stability.
Following Lai's speech, China responded with strong words.
Taiwan independence is a dead end. No matter under what guise or what banner, pursuing Taiwan independence and secession is doomed to fail.
Lai's presidency falls within a key time frame for China. Chinese leader Xi Jinping has set 2027 as the year the Chinese military needs to have an invasion plan in place. According to U.S. intelligence officials, the date also marks the centennial of the founding of the People's Liberation Army. Among Taiwan's residents, opinions differ over the level of the China threat.
We are at a disadvantage and our situation is very dangerous, so we need to protect ourselves.
I think as long as both sides of the Taiwan Strait don't do anything provocative, cross-strait relations probably won't worsen.
President Joe Biden has repeatedly said the U.S. will defend Taiwan if China invades. But views are mixed whether that will really happen.
The US will definitely protect Taiwan. They are not just protecting Taiwanese people, but also protecting democracy, freedom, and human rights around the world.
I think Taiwan shouldn't expect the US to definitely offer us military support when China launches an invasion. I think it's best for Taiwan to avoid starting a conflict with the other side of the Taiwan Strait.
In his new role, President Lai is expected to continue to strengthen Taiwan's defenses and build bridges with like-minded democracies to counter China. William Yang, VOA News, Taipei.
Instead of depending on foreign nations or Taiwan's military to defend the island, some residents are acting now. They're learning how to defend themselves and to protect those around them by taking defense classes. I visited a couple of these classes and have this report. At this airsoft gun club, while these students are learning to handle a firearm that shoots plastic pellets, Tony Liu has shot with real bullets and experienced war.
I bought a plane ticket and went to Ukraine. I didn't tell anyone.
These relics, the reminders of the 3 months Liu spent fighting in Ukraine.
Since the Russia-Ukraine war, there have been more and more of these civil defense classes.
Some people in Taiwan worry if Russia can attack Ukraine, then China could attack Taiwan. Some people take action by learning how to shoot. Others take an interest in using ham radios to communicate. In this classroom at Kuma Academy, students learn how to recognize disinformation, how to survive if basic infrastructure is disrupted, and how to save lives with first aid skills. Most of the students have been women.
It's almost like a team of moms. Their motivation to come to class is they want to know in extraordinary situations, including war, what can they do? How can they protect their family?
The history between Taiwan and China stems from the Chinese Civil War that ended more than 70 years ago. The communists won, and the ruling nationalist government retreated to Taiwan. Beijing considers Taiwan a part of China, even though Taiwan now has its own democratic government. China attacking the island has always been a possibility, but after so many years, Apathy has set in for some people, according to Kuma Academy co-founder Marco Ho.
Often there's a thinking something that did not happen yesterday also did not happen today. Then tomorrow, it also won't happen. This thinking is very dangerous.
Many here say the China threat has changed ever since Chinese leader Xi Jinping came to power.
He wants to be the one to set the international standards.
Another reason to take note of the China threat?
I think the biggest reason is technology. There's confusion in all the information. Because information is very confusing, you don't know if it's going to be a military assault or information warfare.
Liu doubts that the people of Taiwan can protect the island.
I'm not very optimistic. People need to strengthen their ability to defend Taiwan. Life has been too peaceful.
Instead of trying to calculate the risk of war, Ho says, Taiwan's residents need to face the reality that war is possible and should prepare for it. Taiwan's government looks to the U.S. as one of its main allies against the threat of China. U.S. and Chinese defense officials have always offered competing visions for the Asian continent. And at the recent Shangri-La Security Summit in Singapore, those differing visions were on full display, even as Washington and Beijing committed to keep talking. VOA's Bill Gallo has this story from Seoul, South Korea.
This was Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin's first face-to-face meeting with his Chinese counterpart, Defense Minister Dong Jun. High-level talks that China had rejected until recently.
We have always been open to exchanges and cooperation, but this requires both sides to meet each other halfway.
Some differences appeared irreconcilable at this summit, and Chinese officials went on the attack.
Facts show that the U.S. is the biggest corrupter of the international order, biggest obstacle to progress in global governance, and the greatest challenge to regional peace and stability.
In his comments, Austin insisted war is avoidable and dialogue is necessary.
And every conversation is not going to be a happy conversation, but it is important that we continue to talk to each other.
There is much to talk about, including China's military threats against democratic Taiwan. And in the disputed South China Sea, Chinese ships have harassed much smaller Philippine vessels, raising concerns that the U.S.-Philippine Defense Treaty could be triggered.
If a Filipino citizen is killed by a willful act, that is, I think, very, very close to what we define as an act of war, and therefore we will respond accordingly.
Those hotspots make it even more important for the U.S. and China to keep talking, many regional analysts say.
Temperatures are cooling down, although not under the illusion that the problems will be resolved, because these are complex problems. But the priority now is to tune down the temperature to create the right atmospheres for greater confidence building measures, as well as more dialogues and outreach.
At least for now, China is agreeing to continue those meetings. Bill Gallo, VOA News, Seoul, South Korea.
As the U.S., China, and Taiwan work on keeping tensions to a simmer, the residents on Taiwan's Kinmen Island say they could play a unique role in easing tensions. Known for its sorghum wine, wind-lion gods, and knives carved from old mortar shells, the Kinmen Islands sit just a few kilometers from China's southeastern coast. For years, the Kinmen Islands have served as Taiwan's front line against China. But Kinmen's residents today would rather see themselves as a bridge of peace. On the main island of the Kinmen archipelago, beaches and buildings still carry the scars of war.
我本身已经做了大概50年了。这里有一块。我们现在用的这些材料，大部分就是以前那个留下来的一些废炮弹。
Blacksmith and Kinmen native Wu Zhendong has been turning artifacts from Kinmen's violent past into household tools and knives.
有时候你走到外面，在田里面都会捡到嘛。有时候在挖工地的时候，也会挖到。一个炮弹呢，如果说一般我们的家用的菜刀，大概可以做60把刀。
The shells are remnants of the Chinese Civil War. as are the tensions from that conflict, which have been lingering on the islands long after it ended nearly 75 years ago.
1949年这场战役，当然，国军来到了金门，也成为这里为反攻大陆的基地。
In 1949, Mao Zedong established the communist-ruled People's Republic of China. The Kuomintang or KMT government retreated to Taiwan as the Republic of China. On August 23, 1958, communist troops launched a surprise artillery attack on Kinmen. KMT forces on the island returned fire. The artillery battle ended up lasting 44 days. University lecturer and retired Army officer Honor Ni was only 3 years old, but remembers those days vividly.
炮战来得很突然嘛，所以大家都在山丘挖土洞，挖那个土洞躲进去，因为在土洞里面空气不流通嘛，然后很多那个排泄物也在里面，所以空气很污浊。那有一天我就受不了，我就往外跑。 那所有里面的父母亲啊、亲人啊，大家都跑出来追我，但是他们在追我的时候呢，炮弹正好打在那个防空洞里面，所以等于是我救了他们。
Eventually, the communist government and the KMT agreed to shell each other on alternate days. This continued into the 1970s.
我们从小长大，每一个人都会听炮声，知道炮弹落的距离大概离我们多远。炮，这通是很远的，都砰，那应该就在附近了，我们赶快就要躲起来了。
那这很多炮弹，因为它不会爆炸嘛，它是送传单的嘛。我们捡到的时候都会瞄两下，就是大概就是讲说，那个大陆他们的那个风景很漂亮，生活很好，跟我们这一边送过去的也差不多，都一样的。
The shelling ended when the U.S. switched diplomatic recognition from the government of Taiwan to that of Communist China. But another weapon from the propaganda war lives on as a modern-day tourist attraction. Built in 1967, the Beishan Broadcasting Wall blared anti-communist propaganda into China until the late 1970s. The music and messages from these 48 loudspeakers about freedom and democracy could be heard as far as 25 kilometers away.
当年所有的在岛上几乎都是军人，那从小就耳濡目染。 那大家都慢慢觉得说，很崇拜军人。我是坚持要考军校，而且我还号召我们同学到每个班去宣导，说要崇军报国。那崇军报国就是要完成祖国统一。所以这所谓的统一，我也常跟着，所谓的统一不是中国大陆统一我们，是我们来统一他们。
祖国统一是历史必然。
But Chinese leader Xi Jinping defines unification differently. In his 2024 New Year speech, he said Taiwan and China will surely be reunified. Tensions in these waters started to flare up again in mid-February when 2 Chinese fishermen were killed when their boat capsized. The men had been running from Taiwan's Coast Guard, which said the boat had trespassed in waters near Kinmen. Taiwan and China have both increased patrols in the area, while some Taiwan residents have been fearing, even preparing for China to attack. Those in Kinmen share a different view.
我们在金门长大了，我们已经习惯了。我们如果要怕的话，我们在八山炮弹那段时间，我们早就都跑到台湾去了。
金门的同胞根本就没有在担心这个问题啊，因为他们就是我们的根就是在那边，就是从那边过来的，不会有人伤害自己的手足兄弟啊。但是其实
University student Wu Jingxuan says many Kinmen residents feel affection toward China. They identify themselves as Chinese or Kinmenese. Many of them support the KMT party, which favors closer ties with China. Kinmen even imports water from China through a pipeline.
因为本来我们就是中国人嘛，因为在以前那个年代，这个金门、厦门，我们金门以前就是属于福建省了，所以说在两岸还没有断绝来往之前，几乎两岸就是一个生活圈嘛。
Unlike many of the residents on the island, Kinmen native Ouyang Zhengyi voted for Lai Qingde of Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, in January. Lai won the presidency with just over 40% of the vote.
比较稳重，那个也比较踏实啦。
Beijing does not favor DPP supporters who want to distance Taiwan from China. But Ouyang and many KMT supporters in Kinmen are not worried about Chinese pushback.
如果你想打下来，以前都打下来了，金门人不会怕这个了。
大陆会不会打金门？不会，他已经打台湾，所以金门最安全的。
Ni says the key to peace is dialogue.
两岸要谈，要基于普世价值、自由、民主、人权、法治，大家来谈，不是现在来谈统一，是大家来谈，因为你要有开始，就像做生意一样，我们来谈，谈要谈50年、100年来谈嘛，因为这样来谈的话就不会打仗。以中国5000年的历史，朝代变来变去太多了，不重要，重要是说我们要回到我们的根。
Ni teaches young students about their roots through free weekend classes about history and current events.
我们在岛上呢，希望透过血缘再连结，使两岸有更多的发展，更多的机会。我觉得说，你有交流、有往来，我觉得说这个对于两岸的和平是最有利的。
As tensions simmer between Beijing and Taipei, the islanders hope Kinmen can play a unique role, not as a battlefield, but as a bridge of peace. Now for our weekly look at the U.S. election season.
Picture the year 2025. A permanent ceasefire in Gaza could still be out of reach. A war of attrition still simmering in Ukraine, and China continues to be a threat. Whether Joe Biden or Donald Trump wins the presidency, these challenges will remain. Biden's second-term foreign policy will be based on the same principles as his first: global leadership and multilateralism.
The United States will compete, and will compete vigorously, and lead with our values and our strength. We'll stand up for our allies and our friends.
Plus, a focus on an area the administration believes it needs to improve on.
A major initiative with the Congress aimed at truly delivering on the promise of unlocking resources for the developing world.
That means more U.S. investments for debt relief programs, multilateral development bank reforms, and various infrastructure projects worldwide. The goal, to push back on China's global development initiatives by supporting various corridor projects around the world, such as the Lobito Corridor that connects Zambia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Angola.
We can not only build out a transportation capacity to help ensure that we have the inputs for our clean energy supply chains, but also unlock Africa's vast agricultural potential by getting goods to market, and also unlock a digital transformation across that area.
If Trump wins, there won't be as much focus on international development.
Make America richer and safer and stronger and prouder and more beautiful than ever before. I think we have a final shot at it.
Although Trump's catchphrase is America first, it does not mean his foreign policy is isolationist.
Mercantilist, sure. Transactionalist, yes. But I think the most interesting part of his foreign policy is just the degree to which his vision of the tools of U.S. power be used in a different way.
Unwavering support for Israel, conditional aid to Ukraine, and a strong rivalry with China. These are foreign policy principles proposed for a second term by the Trump-affiliated think tank America First Policy Institute.
Those are three areas that any incoming America First administration is going to have to deal with, and is going to have to put that peace through strength test, right? That approach to the test.
While we don't know who will win in November, we do know that foreign policy won't be the determining factor. Polls suggest most Americans are more concerned with inflation, the economy, immigration, and crime than with U.S. engagements abroad. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, Washington.
I'm Elizabeth Lee. We'll see you next week for The Inside Story.